Today, we're diving into a civilization so foundational, it literally invented the city, writing, and the whole idea of law. But here's the crazy part. For thousands of years, it was completely forgotten. So let's journey back to Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, and uncover the story of the world's very first society.
And I'm not exaggerating. For millennia, the world's first great civilization was totally lost. Its cities, its achievements, all of it vanished from memory.
I mean, really think about that for a second. The very place where human history as we know it was kickstarted, just gone. It wasn't history anymore, it was myth. For almost 2,000 years, all that was left were some strange stories and giant mysterious mounds of dirt in the middle of the Iraqi desert. Nobody had a clue that the secrets of an entire civilization were lying right there, just under the sand.
But that all changed back in the 19th century. A handful of incredibly determined explorers and scholars started digging, literally digging in the dirt, and began to piece this forgotten world back together.
It really came down to two breakthrough moments. First, imagine you're with Austin Henry Layard in 1849. You're digging, and you hit something solid. But it's not a rock, it's the face of a colossal winged bull, a lamassu, a guardian of a lost palace. Mind-blowing. And then, a few years later, Henry Rawlinson pulls off an intellectual miracle. He cracks the code of this weird, wedge-shaped writing found on a massive cliff face. That script was the key.
And that script was cuneiform, the world's very first system of writing. Suddenly, all these clay tablets they'd been finding weren't just lumps of pottery anymore. They were business deals, royal decrees, epic poems. An entire civilization, silent for ages, finally began to speak.
Okay, so now we can finally hear these ancient voices. What did they have to say? What secrets about their world were waiting for us on those tablets?
Well, they told a story about a totally new way to live. See, for the first time in human history, people weren't just wandering anymore. They were settling down, building communities, and creating something brand new, the city.
And this whole revolution was possible because they lived in this amazing spot called the Fertile Crescent. But they didn't just get lucky with the land. They engineered it. They developed the world's first irrigation systems, turning this dry region into an absolute farming powerhouse. All that extra food meant villages could grow into cities, like Uruk, humanity's first ever megacity, and which became this buzzing hub for trade and culture.
And believe me, they didn't stop at farming. The Mesopotamians were the original pioneers of civilization itself, creating the social and political rulebooks that we still kind of follow today.
Over the centuries, a few major empires rose and fell here. You had the incredibly inventive Sumerians, we can thank them for writing. Then came the Akkadians, who basically invented the idea of an empire. And after them, the legendary Babylonians, who gave the world something truly game-changing, a written legal code.
Let's talk about Sargon of Akkad for a second, because this was a huge deal. Before him, the world was just a bunch of separate city-states, almost always fighting with each other. Sargon was the first leader in history to conquer them all and unite them under one government. He created the very first empire.
Then, centuries later, you get the Babylonian king Hammurabi, who took things to the next level. He gathered up 282 laws, covering pretty much everything, and had them carved onto a huge stone pillar for everyone to see. No more he said, she said. The law was written down, famously summed up by that principle, an eye for an eye.
But the real genius of Hammurabi's code wasn't just the punishments. It was the fundamental idea behind it, that the law was supreme. Hammurabi made it clear that everyone, even him, the king, had to follow the rules. This was the birth of the rule of law, a concept that is the foundation of almost every legal system on Earth.
So that's the big picture. The empires, the kings, the big ideas. But what was it actually like to be a regular person living in Mesopotamia?
Well, for most people, life revolved around farming barley, wheat, and dates. What's interesting is that at the exact same time, way over in the Indus Valley, the Harappan civilization was growing wheat and barley too, but they had a secret weapon: cotton, a material the Mesopotamians had never even seen.
Society was definitely a pyramid, with the king and priests at the very top. But what's pretty amazing for the ancient world is that women had some serious rights. They could own property, they could run their own businesses, and they had written marriage contracts to protect them. In fact, the first author in all of human history whose name we know was a woman, Enheduanna, the daughter of King Sargon. Oh, and get this, workers were often paid for a day's labor with a ration of beer. Not a bad deal, right?
And these guys didn't just stay home. They built the first real international trade network. Using donkey caravans and boats, their merchants traveled all over, trading with Persia, Egypt, and even reaching the faraway Indus Valley. For its time, it was basically the first global economy. But as we know, what goes up must come down. After thousands of years of incredible power and innovation, Mesopotamia's time came to an end. And it wasn't a single dramatic event, but more like a slow, painful collapse from the inside out.
It really was a cascade of failures, one thing leading to another. The very irrigation that made them rich slowly poisoned their soil with salt, making it impossible to grow food. On top of that, major climate change brought long droughts that dried up the rivers. With food running out, cities became hotbeds of disease and rebellion. The trade routes fell apart, and this once mighty civilization, now totally weakened from within, was a sitting duck.
The final hits came from powerful outsiders who saw their chance. In 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great of Persia marched in and conquered Babylon. A couple hundred years after that, Alexander the Great swept through, and the land that was once the center of the world just became another piece of somebody else's empire.
So what's the takeaway? This incredible civilization wasn't just beaten by armies. It crumbled when its own environmental problems, climate shifts, and internal conflicts became too much to handle. You know, it's a story that's 5,000 years old, but it sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Which leaves us with a big question. Are we learning from their story?